Friday afternoon. I was driving past my wife's office and decided to stop in. No warning, no call ahead. Just take her to lunch. We used to do that more often. The last few years, less. Work, tiredness, life. But that day an hour opened up out of nowhere, and I thought, why not? There was a young girl at the front desk I'd never seen before. She said, "Vanessa?" She went out to lunch with Mr. Cullen. Then she added, "As usual." "As usual?" I said. She caught herself fast. "Oh, I mean, Mr. Cullen takes the staff out a lot. Probably a work thing." Said too fast. But honestly, in that moment, it didn't land on me. In 17 years of marriage, it never once crossed my mind to check up on my wife. I'm not one of those guys who tracks her phone, goes through her texts, runs an interrogation when she comes home late. If you've been next to a person that long, you either trust her, or what are we even doing here? Cullen was a big client of their firm. Rich guy, investor, something like that. Of course they could have lunch about work. The girl probably just picked the wrong words. I asked the name of the restaurant. She said, the Capitol Grill on Main. A few blocks away. Walking down to the parking lot, I was already half laughing at myself. I pictured walking up to their table, shaking Cullen's hand, and Vanessa ribbing me all week about my detective visit. I got in the truck and drove over. I was completely sure that in half an hour we'd be laughing about this together. For the first 10 seconds inside that restaurant, it actually felt like that's how it would go. Then I saw her. I walked in a little after 1. The dining room was half full. The lunch rush had already cleared out. The host gave me a questioning look. I waved him off, looking for my party. I went deeper in, scanning the tables. And I saw her. Vanessa was at the far wall, with her back to me. Across from her sat a heavy-set man in his 50s, gray jacket. They were talking low. I was about to walk straight over. Then I caught one thing. Her hand was on top of his hand, and she, completely on autopilot, was slowly running her finger across his knuckles. I stopped mid-step. Cullen said something to her right then. She laughed, quietly. I wanted to go over, but her voice was already in my head. "You're reading it all wrong. He's a business contact. You've lost your mind." An hour ago I would have said the same thing to myself. No, I wasn't going to stand there looking like a jealous idiot. First I needed to understand what was actually happening. I stepped back, behind a column by the entrance to the dining room, took out my phone, snapped 2 pictures. Then I turned around and walked out. In the parking lot I sat in the truck and put my hands on the wheel. I don't know how long I sat there. One thing kept running through my head. Her hand. The way her finger went across his knuckles. That is not how you sit through a business lunch. I had 4 hours before she got home. And for the first time in 17 years, I didn't know how I was supposed to look her in the eye. I started the truck and drove home. At home I sat down and started remembering. Not nights in general. One specific thing. Last fall, Vanessa had a company event. I went with her. At some point, she walked me over to a big gray-haired guy. "This is Mr. Cullen, our key client. Russ, my husband." He gave me a hard handshake, told me Vanessa was the best thing they had at the firm, told me I was a lucky man. I was proud, standing there nodding. Then something else came back. That whole evening, she barely left his table. I chalked it up to work, to keeping the client happy. At one point I walked up and they both went quiet. I figured business and went over to the bar. At the time, none of it meant anything. Now it meant everything. I kept remembering, and it just kept coming. Birthdays, holidays, she always had a reason to swing by the office for an hour. I drove her over myself. I drove her to him. That bracelet back in March. She said she bought it for herself with her bonus. I was happy for her. The new client in Dallas, the one she stayed 2 nights at the hotel for. Now I had a pretty good idea who that client was. And then the worst part hit me. She wasn't even hiding it. She didn't need to. I was the one explaining it all away. Client. Work. Important guy. Any one of those things on its own. Nothing. I never lined them up because I had no reason to. Now they sat in a row. And the girl at the front desk today said, as usual. Calm. In passing. Not like a secret. Like something the whole office already knew. That's what really got me. Her coworkers knew. People who shook my hand at that company event. They knew what I didn't. To them, I was the chump. The husband who didn't know. All right. If they were used to me being convenient and blind, let it stay that way a little longer. In 2 hours, Vanessa would walk in, kiss me on the cheek, and ask how my day was. And for the first time in 17 years, there'd be one person in this house who knew more than he was saying. That was going to be me. I needed time. And now it was working in my favor. 2 hours later, Vanessa came home, kissed me, said, "Tired clients all day." I didn't say anything. That night, I didn't sleep. I needed something solid. In the morning, while she was still asleep, I opened our shared rideshare app. One account, both of us on it. I pulled up her trip history in Dallas. The route was clean. Airport to the Ritz-Carlton. Pickup at 11:15 at night. The last time she was there was a couple of weeks ago. I sat there with the phone, and I was still trying to find a normal explanation. Late dinner with a client. Room booked for meetings. Schedule got moved. Anything. Then the bracelet came back to me. She'd said she almost lost it at the hotel on that Dallas trip, spent half the evening searching the room. I pulled up the Ritz-Carlton in Dallas. When they answered, I said, "Hi, I'm calling on behalf of Mr. Cullen. He stayed with you 2 weeks ago. Mrs. Hargrove was with him, Vanessa Hargrove. She left a bracelet in the room, and Mr. Cullen asked me to check whether it was found during cleaning." There was the sound of keys on the other end. "One moment, sir. I'm looking in the system." And then I heard the thing I'd been afraid to hear. "I do see the reservation you're referring to, sir. Unfortunately, no bracelet was logged and lost and found for that period. But I can reach out to housekeeping again and call you back today." "No need. I'll let Mr. Cullen know. Thank you." I hung up. I put the phone down and walked outside. There was nothing left to doubt. Saturday afternoon, I sat down at the laptop and started looking up Cullen, managing partner of an investment fund in Chicago, 55 years old. Bio on the company website, conference photos, an interview in a business magazine from 2 years back. Married 28 years. Margaret Cullen, chair of a major charitable foundation in Chicago. Her face on every other website about city philanthropy. Daughter at Stanford, 3rd year. In one photo, Margaret with her daughter at graduation, both smiling, arm in arm. 28 years of marriage. A woman who probably has no idea where her husband spends his free time. Then I opened the website of the firm where Vanessa works. The team section. Her photo, her bio. Senior wealth advisor. Specialization, portfolios of major clients. At the bottom, a list of the firm's key clients. Cullen at the very top. Her career was built on him. On his portfolio. All those years while she was climbing. The promotions, the bonus in March, the Dallas trip. It was all him. This wasn't just an affair with a client. This was an affair her whole job was sitting on top of. Which meant if her firm found out she had a personal relationship with a client, she'd be gone the same day. No severance, no references. They write that into the first page of the contract. I leaned back in the chair. I had 3 things on the table. Margaret, who didn't know anything. His name in Chicago. And her own seat at the firm. All that was left was deciding what order to play the cards in. Monday, I started with figuring out who Margaret Cullen was. Opened Google, and an hour later, I knew everything I needed to know. Chair of a charitable foundation. Her face in magazines. Her speeches on YouTube. Photos from gallery openings. With her daughter at Stanford. With the dogs. And with Cullen, in every other shot. On the foundation's website, there was an announcement. This coming Saturday at 9 in the morning, the quarterly donor breakfast at the Drake Hotel, downtown Chicago. Margaret giving the welcome address. Open to major donors. $5,000 entry fee. I registered and paid for the event. Booked a flight to Chicago for that Friday night. On top of that, I hired a private investigator in Dallas. Explained it short. Her 2 previous trips to the Ritz-Carlton. Dates, flights, hotel. I needed everything they had on this man and these dates. For days. Thursday evening, a courier brought me an envelope. Inside were 42 photographs. Vanessa and Cullen in the lobby, his hand on her waist. In the restaurant, kissing across the table. By the elevator, he's saying something in her ear, she's laughing. Morning, in the parking lot, she's getting into his car. On the back of every photo, the date, the time, the address. The folder for Margaret was ready. That evening, Vanessa asked where I was going for the weekend. I said Chicago. Work. One night. She nodded and went into the bedroom. I left for the airport at 7. Saturday at 8:45, I was already standing in the lobby of the Drake. Suit, dark shirt, no tie. In my hand, a thick paper folder with those 42 photos in it. The breakfast room was on the 2nd floor. Round tables, white tablecloths, about 200 people. Coffee, pastries, quiet conversation about money. I picked up my badge at registration, walked into the room, took a table off to the side. Margaret stepped up to the microphone at exactly 9. Dark blue dress, pearls, gray hair cut short. She spoke for about 8 minutes, thanked the donors, talked about a new program for children's hospitals, asked them to be generous this year. Her voice was calm, used to large rooms. When she came down from the podium, 2 or 3 people walked up to her right away. I waited. When the last one stepped off, I stood up and walked over myself. Mrs. Cullen. She turned, gave me a polite smile. My badge just said Russell Hargrove, Texas. Good morning. How can I help you? I set the folder down on the nearest table, next to her cup of coffee. She picked it up, pulled out a couple of the photos, and froze. She didn't say anything, just looked at the top photo for a few seconds. Then she put it back in the folder and closed it. I thought you'd want to know the truth before this ends up with the lawyers and in the press. I turned and walked toward the exit. By 1 in the afternoon, I was already flying back to Fort Worth. I got home toward evening. Vanessa's car was parked in the driveway. The light in the office was on. I found her there. She looked shaken and rattled. She put her phone down on the desk and said Cullen had just blocked all her numbers, that her management had a letter from his lawyer that morning, that he'd painted her in front of the firm as a blackmailer who'd been demanding money from him to cover himself in front of his wife. She looked me dead in the eye and demanded an explanation. Russ, what did you do? I didn't hide anything. I told her calmly that her meetings with Cullen were no longer a secret, that yesterday I'd been in Chicago and I'd spoken to his wife. Vanessa froze. I added that Cullen had done what any man in his position does. He chose his wife, his money, and his foundation. Vanessa sat down on the chair without a word. She stared at one spot. She was working through this unexpected move from the client her whole career had been resting on for 7 years. The conversation was over, and I just walked into another room and left her alone with the new state of things. Monday evening, Vanessa got a call from her firm's security office. She picked up right in front of me. The voice on the other end was ice cold. It named her last name, her title, her employee number. Said all her system access had already been shut down. That within the hour she was to hand over her work laptop and her badge. That she was being terminated for cause, gross breach of contract. No severance. No references. That was the end of the conversation. The house went quiet. Vanessa was standing in the middle of the kitchen with the phone in her hand, staring at the screen like something else might still come up on it. 7 years of work. Her top client. Her bonuses. Her trips. All of it shut down with one phone call. She finally put the phone down on the table, raised her eyes to me. You did all of this. I didn't say anything. There was nothing to explain to her. Vanessa stood there another second, turned, and walked upstairs. Her time with the firm was officially over. 2 days later, I walked into the kitchen in the morning. Vanessa was sitting at the table with a cup of coffee. I opened a folder and put the papers down in front of her. Divorce papers. Standard terms on division of property. She looked at the first page, then at me. I told her calmly that this marriage was effectively over, that dragging the process out made no sense for her or for me, that the house had been mine before the marriage and stayed mine, that her car and her account stayed hers. She read in silence. I stood by the window, didn't rush her. She didn't argue or come back with counterterms. She picked up a pen and signed every page where it was marked. I took the papers, closed the folder, and drove to the lawyer. The formalities were wrapped up in a few days. The marriage was officially dissolved, and each of us went on to build a new life. I didn't hear anything directly about Cullen after that, but a couple of months later a short item appeared in the business press. He had stepped back from running the foundation due to family circumstances. Vanessa moved out by the end of that same week. Where to? I didn't ask. A month later I heard from a mutual acquaintance that she'd gone back to her mother's house in Houston. No one in Fort Worth would hire her. In their field, everyone knows everyone. Monday morning, I went back to running the company. Life went on. Thanks for the likes. Subscribe. There are many more untold stories to come.